Anime is a cultural product, and for most, even non-otaku, that much is obvious. But the importance of this fact seems underestimated by my personal estimation. When I say anime is a cultural product, I don't just mean that it is set in Japan and infused with Japanese motifs, tropes, and ideals. These things certainly play a part, but anime is a cultural product in its ethnocentrism as well. Though we Western otaku have embraced anime and gone to extensive lengths to do so efficiently, anime is not really made for us. Anime is predominantly set in Japan, utilizes jokes specific to Japanese locales and language, and generally doesn't concern itself with perceptions of reality outside of Japan. This level of ethnocentrism is, I think, partly why many Western otaku go from simply being anime fans to becoming wholehearted weebs. It is a natural horizontal expansion of interests and significantly increases one's ability to enjoy more of what anime has to offer. Frankly, that it doesn't happen to more of us is more surprising than it happening in the relatively few instances it does. After all, for me at least, part of the appeal of anime is that it is distinctly and blatantly not Western in construction. And I can't be the only one for whom such is also the case, whether the source behind it is an outright distaste for Western media, or just being bored by our native storytelling tropes. But the same ethnocentrism that turns some of us into Japanophiles and draws us to anime over Western media is equally responsible for gatekeeping it from others. Because anime is so foreign and uninterested in explaining itself to the uninitiated, it radiates the alien and unintelligible, and we all know humans are most frightened by what we don't understand. So it is with the monumental task of overcoming a facet of the human condition that an ongoing debate rages in our community. What is the best show for introducing someone to anime? Answers to this question run the gamut, as one would expect, and are often prefaced by a qualifying question: what is the person into media-wise? Regardless of the answer, it's my experience that the anime of choice is so given the honor for showing, not telling anime, as it were. The core of the idea is the same as ripping a bandage off quickly rather than slowly peeling it away. Since we value the alien of anime against the culture of our home, we feel this is what should be represented to newcomers. For if they cannot or do not love this more overarching genre-crossing aspect, how or why would they ever watch anime? We want to flood them with as much of what screams anime to us, imagining something in that barrage will stick. But thinking back to the first show I ever watched, Eureka 7 for those wondering, it being Japanese was not the principal reason I chose to pick it up. Hell, I can't even remember what it was aside from knowing there was a connection to something else I had watched around the same time. Sure, after seeing Eureka 7 and realizing there was an entire community around anime, I gradually came to value anime because of its ethnocentric roots, but the key there is gradually. I think a good show to introduce someone to anime with should abscond from typical anime stylings and cultural trappings. And I'll be damned if I don't have an exceptional candidate. Canaan. Little discussed and likely only half remembered, Canaan was a simple anime original show from PA Works in 2009. There isn't anything overly standout about Canaan from a technical perspective. The animation doesn't cut corners when it matters in the action, and isn't unwatchable in more passive scenes. The directing properly maintains episodic suspense without sacrificing intrigue of the overarching plot, and the writing stays easily followable, only flexing in a few key moments for maximum emotional impact. Canaan is a good action fling and doesn't try reaching to be more. But the show's value as an introduction to anime lies more with its tangible details and their marked similarity to Western films and shows of the same genre. Remember, though tangible details are rarely what make a show great, they are what an audience latches onto in the moment. For not being a fantasy or sci-fi show, the most immediately noticeable difference in Canaan from other action anime is in its not being set in Japan. Already in this, much of the ethnocentric alien nature of anime is removed, since it would make little sense to stick to Japanese cultural cues when not in Japan. The show is instead set in Shanghai and the border between China and somewhere in the Middle East. Both of these locations are far more easily digested by a Western viewer. Shanghai itself has been a common setting in countless films as a bustling cityscape which brings in the familiarity of a Western skyline while being able to maintain a sense of foreign intrigue. And indeed, this is the approach taken by Canaan with its main characters of Maria Owasawa and Mr. Mino. As Japanese reporters in Shanghai, they are strangers in a foreign land, but a foreign land not so completely alienating as to be distracting. Their sense of being mildly out of place can be latched onto by the viewer regardless of whether the viewer is from the West or Japan. When the show moves out of the city into the desert wilderness of the boundaries of the Middle East, a far more recognizable setting is given to the Western viewer. In light of recent modern politics and foreign affairs, the deserts of the Middle East are a near constant in Western war dramas and action flicks, just as the jungles of Southeast Asia were following the Vietnam and Korean Wars. As such, the desert in Canaan garners a sense of setting association, as it were, from a Western viewer, setting and meeting expectations for that decision. In keeping with taking its setting to the Middle East, Canaan embraces the political landscape of the region by making its entire plot revolve around the shady dealings of the CIA and terrorism as a whole. Political intrigue and the CIA's misuse of the US's power have been a common and easily grasped theme in Western media since the end of the Cold War and well into the modern era, to the point of being the focus of entire media franchises like 24. Furthermore, the tendency to have villains function as and receive the badging of terrorist has increased to the point of unanimity in a post-9/11 world. In so choosing these plot details, Canaan need not go to lengths to explain the motives of its cast, nor a green anime viewer have to struggle to decipher plot details. But if a more recognizable setting and easily understood plot details were all that were necessary to qualify a show to be good introductory anime material, Canaan wouldn't exactly hold the edge. Instead, Canaan further reduces its Japanese ethnocentricity with its cast, specifically their distinctly diverse ethnicities. Canaan herself is called out twice in the show as being noticeably Arabic. Yun Yun and Liang Chi bring in a Chinese aesthetic. Santana and arguably Cummings are American, while Alfard seems to be a Chinese-Arab mix. Only Maria and Mino are Japanese. Though nothing each of the characters does or says marks them for being from their respective culture and are so in name only for all practical purposes, the effect is not diminished. In the same way that modern Hollywood emphasizes diverse casts and female-led projects, ironic considering the number of anime where female characters are a consistent focus, Canaan being one of these, simply having this eclectic mix of peoples decentralizes the cultural applicability of the plot. Furthering this end, Canaan does not steer clear of using other languages when it can. There are multiple instances where citizens of Shanghai are heard and seen speaking Chinese, and of more particular note, the military forces of the US speak English. Those Americans with more extensive voice lines speak in Japanese for flow and clarity's sake, but the President's Secret Service entourage, the B-2 bomber pilots, and the task force soldiers which attacked the factory all have their lines in English. This is of particular note because it is not in the broken, mispaced English more seasoned Western anime fans have come to expect and regard with a sort of amused fondness. Though brief, their lines are all just as one would expect of an American film or show. Though this level of dedication is standout to us Western otaku, in a new viewer, this is likely to engender thoughts of how Western media sometimes will break from English for authenticity's sake, for scenes where all characters speak a different language. But now beyond the tangible details, Canaan goes a step further to position itself as a prime first anime. As mentioned earlier, much of the vocabulary and setting details are reminiscent of Western government conspiracy action titles. This similarity is perhaps the most important in setting Canaan apart from its anime contemporaries. The show does not stop short with the above specifics, instead even going so far as to structure itself like a Western action piece. Episode plots and rising tension are managed in the same manner, continually shifting from high-stakes world-changing events the protagonists must give their all to prevent, to intensely personal conflicts which test the hero's emotional mettle. That it is difficult to keep from comparing Canaan herself to the likes of Jack Bauer or 007 himself is no accident. And examining the tangible details as indicative of Canaan's nature as a love letter to Western action suddenly makes a world of sense. So the next time you are in a position to explain your love of anime to family or friends, or have the opportunity to put on something around the uninitiated, remember, similarities to our home tropes isn't necessarily a mark against a show. They might even be a catalyst to bringing more, potentially just as passionate people into our community, something every culture needs to grow and survive. Show your people Canaan. Catch you on the flip side.